Yeah, hey Rahul. We'll just wait for 2 minutes and then we'll. All right, so we'll just give it a go. So, like yesterday, we discussed these different types of testing, wherein we went ahead with these four. Like going in primarily for These four, like we talked about, smoke, sanity, regression, and retesting. Now we'll talk about the performance. Now, what happens with the performance is that you go with this performance testing just to make sure that if the performance of that application is according to what you wished for. Now, in this case, what happens now? We are going with the performance of an application. There are different types of testing that actually you do. Just wait, actually, my PowerPoint got stuck. So, when you talk about the performance here, in the performance, first is load testing. Now, load testing is all about when you have to test the behavior of your application, normal conditions, and under peak conditions. Now, what do you mean by all this? Let's say you have an application. In normal conditions, you will see if there are, let's say, 5,000 users logging in to your application at the same time. Then we'll check how the application is behaving. Because we created our application for that many users to be handled at some time. So that's okay. Now peak conditions are let's say it is an e-commerce application like Amazon. So what happens now? In this particular case, it would be going with saying that under these peak conditions, let's say there is some sale is going on, like Black Friday sale is there or Christmas sale is there. In that particular case, let's say some 10,000 users are joining into the application. Now, what happens? How your application is behaving in this scenario. That is what for a specific time, how much load it can take. That is what load testing is all about. So we can check the performance of our application in such scenarios. Additionally, for these, you don't do it manually. Performance testing is something which is always done with some tools. You can't make 5,000 users sitting at the same time on different computers and logging into the application, no, right? So we use some simulation tools which helps us to achieve this. Similarly, we have stress testing. Stress is basically when you will put some stress onto your application. Now I'll say that, okay, how we will put some stress to our application. See, we will do that by making our application going into some abnormal situations. Because when humans are going into stress, when the things are not going according to how they have planned, how they have thought of, similarly, it goes up in here as well. So that you can check how rough and tough your application is. Let's say payment is going on. Generally, when you make a payment, it gives you on the screen, there is a message, don't close the screen. So let's say you close the screen. You do what you're not supposed to do, right? Payment is going on and you disconnect that from the internet. These kind of things, payment is going on and you press the back button. So you try to do the things which as a user you're not supposed to do. So you check that how your application behaves to such stress situations, responds to those stress situations. That is what you will check in this stress testing. Endurance is also connected to the load testing. It's just that how, for how long it can take that load. So we talked about that, okay, 5,000 users. Now 5,000 users logged into your machine, your system, and they are making transactions. They're browsing the products, some of them are shopping and all that. So if they're able to log in, then it is fine. That comes under your load testing. But when you talk about that, okay, for how long it can take that, then it is going to be endurance testing. Okay. Now, scalability is something that is all about whether your application is scalable or not, right? Because let's say you designed your application for 5,000 users, but later on it got successful. And now, let's say in 6 months, there are 50,000 users. Now you design it for 5,000 users, but you are prepared that, okay, even if there are like 10,000 users, we will be able to manage somehow. But now it is 50,000. So you have to make some changes in the application, right? Because ultimately it is your application is a combination of you have front end database and some hardware is there as well. So now front end it's okay, but you have to make your database, some changes in the database, some changes in the hardware. So because of all these changes, if you're just making some minor modifications here and it's working, then it is fine. But if you have to scrap this application and create something new where you can handle 50,000 users, then it means that your application is not scalable. Because scalability is all about how gracefully your application can handle. If there is an increase in the workload, that eventually increases the transactions, database size, and all, hardware configuration as well. So, how much it can support without expanding the user-based transaction and real data storage. That is what scalability is all about. Then we have compatibility. Now, compatibility is what? Compatibility, they say that it is when you have to test your application. For the compatibility across different browsers, different mobile devices, different operating systems, just to make sure that if there are any inconsistencies, so let's say if it is working fine on Windows 10, but on the Windows 11, it's giving some issues. It's working fine with the Chrome browser, but when you go to Firefox, it is not giving the output as it desired. So these are like compatibility testing. Okay. So this is all about, having your customer satisfaction being insurance. So when you go up in here, like let's say database, different web browsers, hardware platforms, OS, users, mobile device, network. So you need to check your application's compatibility with different environments, like different hardware, different OS. It's like that. Now you can do that manually. We have two types of this. One is forward, another one is backward. Forward is like, let's say you created your application for Windows 10. That was the original idea. That okay, on Windows 10 it's gonna work for sure. But later in the market, it came, let's say, Windows 11. Now what happens if it is working with Windows 11, which means your application is forward compatible. Forward as in for the newer or upcoming versions also, if it is working fine, that is forward. Backward, on the other hand, if you talk about, so we can just, reverse that example. Like you created it for Windows 11. Okay. But you have to check whether it will work fine for Windows 10 or not. That is where you call it as having your compatibility, forward compatibility and backward compatibility. Then you'll have like security testing. So what would be there for this security is security. They say it is all about um, going with checking your application against its how good it is against these attacks, right? Like you have these attacks, cybersecurity attacks, viruses. Generally, you are not going to do it. This will be primarily done by experts, security experts. Yeah, see here. experts of the info. Okay, they are the one who are going to do it. With experts only, it can be done. Generally, they hire these cybersecurity experts, and it's not that they're just going to work for you only. They will actually work with into multiple projects. They'll check like different applications there. That is how it would go. This is how we go with this. Now comes cookies testing. Now what works in that cookies also, no? With cookies, what we call it as cookies are actually, they go with the cookies saying that these are actually text files. And these are there in your application. You might have seen, like whenever you visit a website, you might have seen a message coming up saying that, okay, if you have to accept the cookies and all that. So these are actually related to the performance itself. These are making your application going faster, and you can even get the navigation patterns of the users, like how they do, and according to that, you can cater them these content. Okay. So how you can check that? These are actually some very small text files, these cookies. So you can test these by disabling the cookies, right? You can testing these cookies by making some changes into those text files. You can remove these and then you see how your application behaves. You can corrupt these, right? Then you can see how your application performance is affected. You can encrypt the cookies, you can check the encryption testing, and you can even check like how the cookies will be same for your application, right? But actually, every browser maintains its own copy of cookies. It's not like, something shared. Some of those are shared, but not every. So you just check how is the behavior of your application if the cookies are there and how different browser is handling those cookies up in here. That is what you do. This. That is how we have this. These are like different types of testing. Now what we're going to do is, actually this is all what we have with this. Primarily, now see when we know what are these different types of testing, then we will talk about, let me share the next. I've shared this in the chat as well. PDF in this, we'll talk about now different techniques. Now, see, when we know, just give me one quick second. When you download those, just give me 2 minutes. All right, so now see, we have discussed about SDLC. Then we talked about what you would be doing as a VA. Then we started with the testing introduction. We went with SDLC, right? Then we talked about different types of testing. So now it is a good time to see how you can design the test case, because right after this, now this is the last phase. After that, you have to test the application. This is something that we already know, that I showed you this in when we were discussing the SDLC. At that time, I showed you that how a test case document will look like. Kind of have the details of everything, right? What you will test, how you will test, data, expected outcome, everything will be here. All right, now this test case will include these different variables, different conditions, and all up in here. Scenario is primarily your high level. We talked about this also, right? That scenario is more at a high level, more of those like one-liners. Primarily, it is all about what to test. Okay. And test cases are having like details about everything. What to test, how to test, what data you will use, right? What you're expecting as the output, in fact, actual output, error, everything. Test case is like pretty comprehensive document up in here, right? When it comes to this. Now, additionally, what you have with this is you would be also having test data. Test data we have seen already. So test data is not going to be an issue. with this. Now, see, this is just a brief about how would you have these test cases. The test case is more like a concept, and it's actually going to provide you all of those up, right? When you talk about this, though, it actually gives you complete detail. That is what actually a test case document is. Okay. So we can talk about each of these. In fact, when you say like how exactly you would have this as a test case, it's a complete documentation. Scenario is, on the other hand, would primarily talk about just this. Right? So that is how we can have this primarily. In fact, these are all like self-explanatory. Not to go more with that something, yeah. Now we talk about the test case design techniques. Test case design techniques are actually going in with these three categories. One you have as specification, which is actually a requirement specification based test case design technique. Structure. Structure actually is your code structure based design technique. And the other one is experience based. Experience based is, when you have some experience, and based on that, you're just creating your test cases and you're going with that. We'll talk about this. Then go ahead primarily with this up in here. We'll talk about each of these. First, we'll start with the specification list, where we have these subtypes. First goes in with equivalence partitioning. Now, what the equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis, actually both of these go hand in hand. Because what happens in these now? Let me open a document. There, I'll tell you how this all works actually. See, let's say I just hide this for now. Let's say we have this requirement. What is your requirement? That you have an input field, and that input field must have this input number between in just in 4 digits. So 4 digits, when you say it's going to be between 1000 and 9999. Okay. Now, when you say between 1000 and 9999, that means that means that it is we have to test this. Now see, there is one way actually. You start with 1000, then you go with 1001, then 2, then 3, and you keep going till every number. But in that case, how many test cases you will create? 1000 to 9999, it's like 9000. Because for every value you're testing it. But this is just the valid values. What about the values which it is not going to accept? That also we have to check, right? That if it is accepting 500 or if it is accepting 12,000, those also I need to check. So other than these 9,000 values, I also need to test less than 1,000. And I also need to test more than 9999. Here it might go till 0. And here it might go till infinity. Now you can imagine how many number of values that you would be testing it with. This is we call as exhaustive testing. That is not recommended. So to avoid that, we have something known as equivalence partitioning. So now what would you do in the equivalence partitioning actually is you will create partitions of your this data. Then how would you do that? For that, actually, you would simply go with you would simply go with creating partitions. Depending upon, see, this is something that you will get in requirements. So now how would you create the partition? Like this. So now what partitions you have created? See, one partition you created between this and this is your valid values. Another partition you created for less than 1000. Right? Now I said, okay, partitions are created, but how will we test this? So because we are calling it as equivalence partitioning, so which means they assume that every value in this partition will have an equal effect onto our application. So now you need not to go with each and every value. Rather than that, you pick up one value from each partition. So let's say you have picked up 680 here, 2584 here, and 12054 here. That is your this. How do you call it as? Equivalence partition. So now rather than having those 9,000 valid test cases, and like n number of for different values, now how many we need? Three. With three test cases, with three values only, you will be able to test it. This is equivalence partition. You create partitions of the values based on the requirements, and then you pick up one value from each partition, assuming that all the other values in the same partition will behave same when you pick up any other value. That is equivalence partitioning. But here also what happens now, generally the programmers also use it who are creating the application. They are also putting in some conditions in the background that, okay, only this value needs to be, allowed to be entered there. But generally they do major mistakes at borders. So then you go with, see here at the boundary level, be more problematic. So they say that don't worry about that. What you can do is see what is your range. Your lower value is this, and your upper value is this. So now what we would actually do is we'll go, let's say we call this as X, call this as Y. So it will be like, or let's say just go with this only. So one value will be 1000. Another value will be 1000 minus 1. Plus for the 9999 also same thing. Minus 1. That is how you would go with this. And having these now, you can say that, okay, now at the boundary level also, it's not going to have any errors. So now primarily how many values you got? If we go with equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis both together, equivalence partitioning has given me 3 values earlier, 3 individual values. And boundary value analysis also giving me some 6 values here. So in total, it becomes 9 values. So 9 values to test with these values for that application. Earlier, what we calculated, there were 9,000 only for the valid test case. Forget about the others. They were like infinite values that you need to test with. Which you are calling it as exhaustive testing. But now, with these techniques, what we have here, don't need to worry about. We have all that covered. Because now we're going to test that all with only 9 values. That is how it all goes. Okay. So that's what they are mentioned here as well. Equivalence partitioning is all about first creating those partitions by dividing into groups based on the certain logic which would be defined in your requirement. Then picking up one input to represent the whole group and then executing a test case as an input, showing everything. This is your equivalence partition. I have this example, which is fine. Then comes boundary value that I told you. So let's say this is your X and this is your Y. So this we have as X minus 1 This we have as y minus 1. This is your x again. This is your y again. Y. So this is how we got 6 values for 2 partitions, 3 partitions. That is your equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis. So I have shared this document with you. There are other techniques as well, but that we'll discuss on our in our next session. Do you have any questions from what we have discussed so far?
No, not really. But I'll reread it again, and then if
Yes.
I do, I'll ask you. But I mean, it was theoretical stuff, so it was pretty like self-explanatory.
Exactly. So I have shared that
Yeah, but
as well.
um, yeah, I downloaded that stuff, and I'll have to reread the testing because I'll take notes on it. I understand better that way, and then from there, if I have any questions, I can ask you.
Wonderful. All right.
And so I also got notice that my EAD has been shipped. So as soon as I get that, then hopefully we can begin my marketing.
What will shift? Sorry.
My EAD was shipped.
Okay, okay, okay. Wonderful.
Yeah, so hopefully I should be getting it next week.
Yes. So please inform that to your respective marketers as well. So
Okay,
that
and then so you were saying once I do get it, then we'll be looking at the job descriptions and then going according to that, what like you would show me and stuff? Or are you still going to be teaching me specifically for testing and all that, and then we'll search for job applications for that accordingly?
no, no, no. Our marketing team will be there. They'll help you with everything. Okay, your resume preparation, training preparation, everything. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, that sounds good to me.
That's how it's gonna be. No problems.
All right, I will talk to you on Monday.
Sure. Have a wonderful weekend, Rahul, and we'll meet on Monday. Bye. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye bye.